Welcome to the Property Couch, where each week you get to listen to two of Australia's leading experts. Bryce Holdaway, co-host of Location Australia on Foxtel's Lifestyle Channel and Escape from the City on the ABC. And Ben Kingsley, Chair of Property Investors Council of Australia and the founder of the 2018 Property Investment Advisory Firm of the Year.
Alright folks, you're on the Property Couch for each week. Ben and I bring you the insider's guide to property finance and money management. Hello Ben.
Hello mate, how are we going?
Very good. Another special guest today. I'm super excited because this is a topic that we haven't necessarily delved into. It's around the world of architecture. So we've got an architect on today. But before we get there, Ben, we've got a very special guest for next week as well. For our 250th. So
250th.
Super excited about that.
Countdown, drum roll please.
Which is really, really good. But today we have Amelia Lee, who is the Undercover Architect. We're going to go through a wonderful framework that she's going to share with us. But before we get there, Ben, I'm going to do my Mindset Minute theme today. We have James Clear coming on our podcast over summer.
We do.
We saw him up at ARIC. I've spoken about him before.
Yep.
Got some really, really good stuff. So just as an entree leading up to that podcast that we're about to do with him, he says true behaviour change is actually identity change, Ben. So I'll give you some examples. He said be it versus do it. All right. So the goal is not to read a book, Ivis. The goal is to be a reader. The goal is not to run a marathon. The goal is to become a runner. If you could hear Ivis, that's what she said. The goal, Ben, is not to write a book. The goal is to become a writer. So therefore, where's that apply to us as property? Well, the goal is not to buy a property, Ben. The goal is to become an investor.
Yes,
So you become an investor, you will then buy a property as a result, so the habits will form. So what does investor mean? You've got to get your mindset sorted. You've got to understand the strategy, and importantly, you've got to be able to do the execution. So the goal is not to be, do it. The goal is to be it, Ben.
Can I add to that, mate? Can I add to that?
Yes.
Dr. Peter Fuda says, change is not the goal is the goal. Similar type of concept. So he's sort of saying that. So, people talk about, I need to change, why? The goal is the goal. Change is just the transformation to get to the goal. So I like it.
So every action you take, Ibis, is a vote for the type of person you wish to become.
Behaviour.
So Ben, that's a nice little entree into our interview that we've got today with Amelia Lee. She is based in New South Wales. We're in Victoria. So we've done this interview just a little earlier. So we'll cut to that right now. All right, today, Ben, we've got a very special guest. We have Amelia Lee, who's the founder and architect behind Undercover Architect. Hello, Amelia. Welcome to the couch.
Thank you so much for having me. It's fantastic to be here.
Hey, intriguing name, Undercover Architect. I was exposed to your teachings, your information. Recently, my wife listened to a webinar that you were doing because we're in the process of thinking about what renovation looks like for us. I know Ben's just gone through a major one himself. So I thought it'd be really intriguing to get you on and see if we can learn a little bit about what you do and how you do what you do, because I think there's some really great information. But before we get there, can you take us back to how you got involved in architecture and property in the first place?
Yeah, fantastic. So I've been in the industry for almost 25 years now. So I studied architecture straight out of school. It was for me a really beautiful marriage between an artistic kind of creative endeavour and something that had a really pragmatic outcome. And I grew up in Sydney. I did my degree at the University of New South Wales, and I worked in Sydney for a couple of years before I travelled overseas. So I was fortunate to work on the Sydney Olympic site, all of the public domain, the lighting towers down the main boulevard, all of the in-between spaces. I was part of the team that brought that to life, and Customs House at Circular Quay, some really fantastic, projects. And then I went overseas. I worked in London and worked on some big projects there, and then came back and relocated to Brisbane, and again worked for some great design firms in Brisbane. And then the bulk of my career in Brisbane, I worked for about 7 years for Mirvac in Queensland as part of their senior design team. And I think there, what I really loved, I also did some postgraduate studies in property economics, and I got to get a real taste for what it looks like when you marry together a financial outcome, a design outcome, a lifestyle outcome, and a constructability outcome, and how that really delivers a fantastic home that's also a really worthwhile asset for somebody, to have and to potentially realise later on in their life. my mum had always been a bit of she'd just always been up a ladder painting at our place growing up. I think she painted the outside of our house 3 times over in the, couple of decades we lived there. She was always changing the inside. She's only 5 foot tall. She's a little powerhouse. She's gone on to do several renovations, and that's been how she's built up her financial nest egg. And my husband and I, we also did 3 renovation projects of our own in Brisbane across about a 12-year time frame. So I had a baby per renovation. Our kids all learnt to climb ladders before they walked. That was how we lived in these projects. And I just loved that you could take something and really improve it and create a really livable, functional family kind of environment, and create something that was really worthwhile, either for you, for your long-term forever family home, or to be able to then sell and realise the financial value out of that. And the thing is that, our buildings around us actually create the environment that we live in every day. How your neighbour renovates or builds their house impacts how you get to live, whether it pinches all your sunlight, whether it compromises all your privacy, or whether it actually creates a beautiful, secure, safe community where everybody gets to go out into the world as the best version of themselves every day. And I think we really underestimate the power that our homes have on the quality of our lifestyle and our mindset and, how we feel about ourselves. And I think that there's become, particularly through the 80s and the 90s, when, there was quite a disposable approach of like building to the greatest kind of amount on the site and, getting rid of eaves and those kinds of things. And I'm seeing a real shift in this beautiful turnaround to people really building and renovating with intention, whether they're doing it for investment or doing it for themselves. They understand the impact that the built environment has and the sustainability conversation and all of those types of things. So that was a very long-winded answer to your question, but it's, for me, I'm very passionate about just how our homes and the buildings around us can play a huge part in helping us be the people that we really want to be in our lives.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, you mentioned there the international experience. What sort of influences does that bring into the way you design now? And having that exposure overseas, would you prefer to be a creative overseas, or do you think that we're lucky here and we've got some great homes to build here?
It was interesting I worked in London, and I worked on the rebuilding of a couple of big commercial projects that had huge heritage constraints just because of the age of the areas that they were being done in, and it's quite constraining in terms of that level of innovation and that level of adventurousness, I suppose, in the way that you get to design. And also then just the weather impact of what it looks like to have to build over there, the limited amount of time that you have to kind of actually do work in. I think in Australia we've got some incredible opportunities in terms of the types of environments that we create. We've got, this fantastic outdoor lifestyle we can really tap into. We've got, when we can handle the heat, like when we can deal with the heat of the sunlight in the way that we design our homes so that we protect our homes from them, we can actually capture the beautiful qualities of natural light that are scientifically proven to support and improve our well-being and to lower anxiety. And I think as Australia, we also just have a much more adventurous spirit when it comes to design. And I see that in the architectural community here. I see that there's not a particular attachment to one type of style. And I see, like I've been working with American homeowners through Undercover Architect. They buy some of the Undercover Architect online courses, and I've now created an online course for American homeowners. And it's really amazing to watch them actually gravitate towards the way that Australians live in this kind of indoor-outdoor lifestyle, where they're really capitalising on what's actually available outside of their house. It's not just about the walls and the containment of the space within.
And has that been the biggest trend that you think over your 25 years of doing this that you've noticed in the residential space? What is that? Is it the alfresco indoor outdoor, or is there something else that you've really noticed that we're completely different and our approach is different over the last decade or two?
Oh wow, that's a big question. Yeah, I definitely think that indoor outdoor environment, I think that look, it's hard when you look at mainstream building, and not the architecturally designed approach. You can very quickly think, well, we just copy everything from overseas. Everybody wants a Hamptons house these days, or those kinds of things. It can seem like we're just a follower, and we're just doing whatever is being fed to us from overseas, and we're sort of chasing these styles. But I think when you actually start to look at architect designed homes, there's some super clever innovations in terms of material use, of how space can be used to be really multifunctional. People are being really clever with their sustainable use of materials. really maximising the opportunity to lower water use, lower energy use, create really sustainable environments, and really focusing on how can we get our dollar. I mean, it's quite expensive to build and renovate in Australia, particularly compared to a lot of other places around the world. And how can we get that dollar to stretch further so that we're actually creating spaces that are going to serve us over the long term, that they're not just fit for one purpose. And it is very difficult because you kind of got to separate out what you see get built, by the acre in big master plan developments versus what you see built on a one-to-one kind of custom basis. They're two very different kind of animals in Australia. And I think that, I still see people building very, very large homes with, they'll have 4 bedrooms and 5 living spaces. And, there'll be this theatre room in the guts of the house, which is really just a big storage room because it's got no natural ventilation or windows. And it was just like they couldn't design it any other way. And they've got this one room that's going to do this one job. And then at the other end of the spectrum, you've got these very clever, compact houses where people are actually choosing to have more garden space and more outdoor area. So it's this great big range of stuff. But yeah, I think that when we tap into what is possible about how we can be clever about our investment, and we don't necessarily get beholden to that real estate checklist of 4 bedrooms, 2.5 bathrooms, 2-car garage, then we can I do see sort of there's these two trends of people just building more and more and more and more and more and bigger and bigger and bigger, and then other people just completely rejecting that and saying no, I'm actually going to choose something different. So
Hey, you made a reference before with your parents or your mum to the financial nest egg, and then you also mentioned you've done 3 renovations. How much is the financial side important to you? Because clearly there's a creative outlet for you, and you obviously have experience in that. But what part does property play in your own personal investment philosophy, and how much has being able to add value through your skill set been able to make a difference on the purchases you make and then the subsequent properties that you've been able to own and the family homes you've created?
For us personally, it's been huge. We now live in the Byron hinterland, and we got here by basically doing the renovations, the 3 renovations that we did, and building up that financial nest egg. My husband and I, we've been together now almost 20 years, married for about 13 and a half. And we just made a decision that when we were going to start having children, we used to argue over who was going to get to stay home with them. And so we both wanted to be really involved in their upbringing. And so the renovating was a means of us being able to, be able to both juggle working on the properties. I did the design work, my husband did the bulk of the building work on them. And then it meant that we didn't have to put the kids in childcare. We were just both around. We were able to work flexibly. And there's only been 1 year in the time that we've been together where both of us have worked full time. So the rest of the time, either I've been not working, I've been on maternity leave, and my husband's been working, but he's been working a 4-day week or something like that, and then renovating on the other 3. Or I've been working and my husband's been home doing the renovation and looking after the kids. And now we're both at home and living on this property. So for us, it's been critical. We both were in kind of low income careers, and we just knew that for us to get ahead, we were going to need to do that. And I mean, I grew up in Sydney. Part of the reason of moving to Brisbane was because of the affordability and the opportunity for us to sort of get ahead as well. And yeah, I've been fortunate to see my mum do a similar thing in terms of, I just think it's an incredible pathway. And for me, I love being able to work with homeowners to really recognise they could be spending the money that they're renovating or building with on anything. They could be just blowing it on a great big holiday. They could be doing anything. They need to see a return for it. And it's always difficult when you're doing your long-term forever home to think about it being a financial return. But I think equally as important is the lifestyle return you're going to get from the investment that you're making in that home. And one of the things that I always first teach people that work with Undercover Architect is let's look at the real estate assessment. Let's look at what's sensible to spend. Let's look at what actually is meaningful in terms of this investment. So you've got some container around how you're going to spend your money, because picking a budget's always tricky. Whenever people are doing their long-term family homes, they always it's just, what is the most that I can afford to spend on this project? But let's actually put some rational kind of container around that, what makes sense to spend, and where are you going to invest that budget to really get the biggest return on your lifestyle? Where does it really make sense to put that money into? Sometimes it can just be you're adding an amazing outdoor alfresco entertaining area and you're improving your kitchen. And that may not feel like a lot, but the lifestyle transformation that can do for a family is extraordinary. So, it's all those kinds of conversations that I have with homeowners, really about, let's just get really pragmatic about this. It's a very emotional process when you're building or renovating, particularly your own home. Let's just see, how can we balance this out and make sure that we're investing in the most sensible way.
Did you find that you were renovating for your heart that turned into a profit, or were you renovating for a profit when you were actually designing your three?
It's interesting. The first house that we bought was obviously as a first home buyer, and my husband actually was at university full time when we bought that house, and I had just started working for Mervac, I think, and so we were just doing work here and there on the weekends, and when my husband had his university holidays. And for us at that stage, it was just a means of improving that property, and we just knew that we could improve it. We had the skills to do that. And I think when we bought our second one, that was a case of, we had another baby on the way, and the market was really good. And I just went to an open inspection by chance to see, it was in the same suburb, but it was on a block of land that was about 1.5 times the size, in a much nicer sort of street. And I just went out of curiosity, and we both really liked it. So we put a 3-month settlement on it, and then madly finished off the renovations on the first property, put it on the market, sold it within a week of it being open, and were able to then settle on the second property. The third property was very much a play on making a profit. It was the biggest project that we did. We bought in an area that had very high-end homes, and we renovated it to meet the market. And it was a big undertaking. We turned a house that was about 100 square metres into something that was over 400 square metres, and it was sort of 3.5 years of our life, and we both swore we would never do another project again after that. But I know we still get itchy about things. We still we both around this place. And
I've done 3 on the one house, and I'm in exactly the same boat. I'll never do it again. No, I've had some
one per house now for you, isn't it?
Yeah, that's moving out that period. So.
It is tricky. I think, we both love seeing. We just both love seeing the change that you can make to a property, and we both. It's funny. I know I walk into any house and I'm thinking, okay, what would I do to improve it? It's just an occupational hazard. But, it is this thing, I think, when you start to see what's possible, then, it's just a fantastic, exciting thing to be able to bring a house, particularly renovations, to bring a house back to life and give it an opportunity to keep living and serving the families that live in it. So.
Yeah, well, he's done a good job, so it's certainly worth the effort. But you wouldn't want to do it again. Hey,
no.
if we've got some listeners, Amelia, who are sitting in a home and they're trying to work out whether they should go and do a building project or they should renovate what they've currently got, and maybe can relate to certain parts of your story. What's some of the advice that you'd give them to determine which path they should go on, and what's maybe some of the things that people don't think about when they're sort of considering those two options?
Yeah, well, I think that the first recommendation I always have is you just actually have chat with local real estate agents about what are properties kind of selling for. I always, whenever you're trying to weigh up building new versus renovating, it's always worthwhile looking at what your property is worth now compared to what you paid for it, what then it would be worth with a renovation done on it, and does that give you enough money to actually do anything of meaningful value with the property? And what then would it cost to actually buy a block of land or buy an old place that you can knock down and build new? And how would that compare in terms of the financial value of that item? I actually find that some people they prefer to have a new home than they prefer to renovate. It's really interesting seeing, just in the years I've been doing this, the two camps. Some people just want to live in a new house that hasn't got old features, doesn't have things or quirks or anything like that. And then other people just love old homes and seeing, either buying one that's been renovated or renovating it themselves. They love to see this old character and this old personality and the qualities of an older home. So, but it's, some it also is going to depend on where you want to live. Some places, some suburbs, it's very difficult to get permission to knock down a house. So you've really got to weigh up, where are you living? What are the character and the quality of the houses in that area? Is that, if you're going to be wanting to live in that specific area, does that just mean you're going to have a renovated house or live in a house that you'll renovate yourself? Do you have the option to build new? What do you really want as a family? Do you like this idea of living in a house that nobody else has ever lived in before? And then what are those financial equations in terms of what the property is going to be worth at the end of it versus what you can afford and what makes sense from a real estate point of view. Because I always tell people, you may not intend on selling, but you never know what's around the corner. And you could have great news, or you could have some kind of difficult kind of challenge and need to sell your house tomorrow. And so you always have to know that it's going to financially stack for you at some point.
And what do those conversations look like when you're having those chats to potential customers around budget and around finances? The reason we did 3 renovations is because we couldn't afford to do all of them on the one house at the one time. So, you know, what are some of the how do you move the dial in their mindset or the decision making when budget is a constraint, when they know that they want to do more, but with less, as you were saying before?
Yeah, I find that without fail, people's kind of what they want to do compared to, well, their budget's 50 to 75% of where it needs to be based on what they want to do. So they always need twice as much money or 1.5 times as much money as what they're saying they want to spend. We've been fed this kind of diet of reality TV, which means that we've just got vast underestimations in terms of what it costs to renovate or build. So for me, there's always this rude kind of awakening where people really, because it's always so much money. It doesn't matter whether it's 100,000 or it's 2 million. It is always so much money to the homeowner that is presenting this budget to you. And there's always kind of this rude adjustment at the beginning. I'm always very frank with the way that I speak with people about things, and I feel that you have to be, as a homeowner, pretty upfront about the budget that you have, because you don't get the answers that you need early enough if you're not being honest about what your budget is. And people get really nervous about talking about budget. They don't want to tell people in case it just means that they're going to get taken for a ride and it's all going to get spent. So yeah, I often tell people they need to obviously do that real estate kind of assessment to see what makes sense, chatting to builders in their area who are doing projects like the project they want to do, and just understanding the rough kind of square metre rates that builders are building for, to sort of see those and see what finish quality they're getting and what are the types of projects that they're doing, because from state to state, those square metre rates will vary, and from project type to project type as well. And it's really important that they actually establish the strategy for their project before they dive into their project. So understanding, are you going to be, for example, if you're building new, is your budget enough for you to do a custom home with a builder that only does a few projects per year? Or are you going to just be at a budget point where you have to choose something off the plan and work with a volume builder? Or is it somewhere in between where you can do a custom design but with somebody that builds 80 homes per year, so they've got different efficiency models? Same with renovating. There's specific strategies that I have in order to try and capitalise on new build efficiencies in a renovation project, but also looking at trying not to pull the house apart to put it back together. A lot of people don't think about the Pandora's box that they're going to open up when they start to renovate and the unexpected costs that they might have. So it's a lot of due diligence around understanding what is the latent conditions in that house, what are you potentially going to have to spend money on just as a maintenance requirement. You have people sort of say, oh yeah, I want to renovate, but at the same time I want to replace the roof or upgrade all the electrical, redo X, Y, and Z. And it's like, well, that's stuff you have to do just to maintain that property. If you're going to include that in your renovation, you're going to be disappointed with how much your renovation is actually going to buy, because, you know, that's all money that you're going to spend. So yeah, for me, you've got to be having those conversations really early and get to the kind of get those questions answered very early on. People unfortunately go 12, 18 months sometimes into their projects before they're starting to get honest advice on their budgets, just because they haven't been able to talk openly with the people that they're kind of relying on. So
good advice.
Yes. Amelia, what I wanted to do is hopefully give our listeners a framework. And when we were chatting before we push record, there's 4 phases to every project, whether you're going build or renovation. So I wonder if we could work through that framework with you and hopefully give the listeners some really cool takeaways. So what's the first of those 4 phases?
Yeah, well, before we dive in, Bryce, I'd just love to mention, because there's a mistake that gets made right up front in terms of understanding that there is 4 phases. Yes. So the 4 phases, I'll just give an overview before we jump in. So the 4 phases, first one is before you begin your project. The second one is getting your design right. The third phase is before you build. And then the fourth phase is getting your project built. Mm-hmm. And the biggest mistake that homeowners make is that they only focus on phase 4, getting your project built. Yeah. And they don't understand that there's these 3 phases that need to happen before you get your project built, or they want to barrel through them very quickly. And then the construction phase ends up being a series of disasters, unexpected costs, time delays, and mistakes because they just didn't get their ducks in a row before they started construction. So the idea is that you want to spend time in those first 3 phases so that your construction process goes really smoothly. You don't have you don't have unexpected surprises and costs, and everybody can just do what they need to as efficiently as possible. So you get out the other end with a very streamlined process. So that's sort of just the overview. In terms of the first one, that get before you begin, the big mistake that people make here is that they don't understand that there's a fair few things that need to happen before you start designing your project, and they need to happen in the project anyway. And because people just dive straight into the design process and they don't get those things in train, they then find out later that that has to be done in their design phase, or their approval phase has to be stalled in order to get those things done, and it's frustrating and can often cost extra money down the track. So before you begin, it's basically finding out what is the overall process going to look like for you to actually run through your project, get from the beginning of being able to speak to council right through to finishing construction, understanding that overall roadmap so you always know how to anticipate the next step you've got to make. Getting your property surveyed is a really important step, and a lot of homeowners don't do that, so they assume that their fences are on their boundary lines, for example, and there's been so many times I've seen that people have assumed that, and it's not until construction started that they found out the fence line isn't, and by that stage it can cause huge headaches and disasters. Pulling together the right team for your project, getting the right people on board so that you're investing money where it's going to make a difference, and really grabbing that expertise that's going to support you having a much smoother and simpler project for yourself. And there's a few other things just to really get your understanding of your site, that real estate conversation about what budget actually makes sense, so that you're really in a good position that when you start designing, you've got the information in place, all of your ducks in a row, so that your design process can go smoothly.
So you talked about the team there. What's the baseline team that people should be really thinking about?
I actually think a designer is a very handy team member to have on board. People are quite hesitant because they feel they're going to have to relinquish control, or basically the designer's going to tell them what their house needs to look like. But I think that when you work with a designer, you just access a level of expertise, and they can also anticipate things that you might not have even thought about yet in terms of your needs as a family, or if you're a property investor, be able to understand what the market might be looking for and those types of things. So I think a designer is always and whether that's a building designer or an architect, that's a personal choice, but they're very different kind of professionals, and it's really about you finding the right fit for you and your project. And then it's a case of actually understanding, are there going to be consultants that you physically do need based on where you're doing your project? So sometimes you might need a heritage consultant, sometimes you might need a hydraulic consultant. You'll generally need a structural engineer on all projects. They're the only ones licensed to advise on structural design. And then, of course, it's a case of looking at if you need somebody to support you, whether you're doing costing or whether you're going to bring in a builder early and work with them collaboratively on your costing. And just pulling together that team very early. One of the big problems that people do when they're building or renovating is that they try to be the go-between all of the people that they're working with, and they will sort of silo all of the activity. And what happens is there's these great big gaps of assumptions that fall in between, what they're siloing. Whereas if you can actually build a collaborative team that are all communicating with each other, all supporting your lack of expertise or your lack of experience with their knowledge and their expertise, then that's how you can have a project running really smoothly overall.
Nice. Beautiful. So is that all for the before you begin, or anything more you want to add before we get into getting your design right?
No, that's probably it. So yeah, it's just a case of understanding there are some steps to take. Oftentimes,
I'm just writing some notes for myself here. No, because I'm sort of like I've already found 2 mistakes that we made. So in your overview, I could have found more, but we got an architect, so we had the surveying done. We did have the boundary that was out. We identified that when we bought the property, so we had the, obviously the fence line was in place for a period of time. So we argued that point. We had evidence of that, so we wrote it into our contract when we were buying. And the next door neighbour, we got them to sign that to say that in terms of adverse possession, we were taking at that claim, and they were accepting of that, which was good. So we did the surveying work. We then got the civil engineer and the building engineers because we were going up. So ours is a brick cal bungalow, 1927 at the front, and we had grand plans of going up and going out the back and pools and all that sort of stuff, right? So we did a couple of things right, but I'll tell you about the big mistakes later as we go through the podcast. So step number 2 then, getting your design right.
Yeah, so getting your design right is really about setting that design strategy in place and really understanding what exists on your site that you can maximise to really bring benefit to the quality of life in your home. So many homeowners don't understand the power of designing for orientation, which is designing for the movement of the sun. So, and it's funny because a lot of real estate agents I found will say, oh, this is a north-facing property, but it's north to street. It's not north to rear. Yeah. And, in Australia, the sun rises in the east and sets in the west everywhere, but in the southern hemisphere, it obviously moves through the north. And if we can design a home that really optimises how natural light enters it, how we manage the heat then throughout the times of the year to let it in winter, keep it out in summer, we can dramatically improve how our home feels and also how it functions, how expensive it is to heat and cool, and how sustainable it is overall. And as I said earlier, natural light is scientifically proven to lower anxiety and help our well-being. And when we live so much in our homes, to be able to have an environment every day that helps us feel better about ourselves and about our lives, then that can be dramatically transformational. So, and it's funny, I have a lot of people say to me, I never understood the difference it could make having this. I'd been living in a south-facing house, I just thought that was okay. And then I've moved to this north-facing home, and I can't believe how amazing it is that there's just this beautiful quality of light in the living spaces and those types of things. So understanding your orientation, there's a fantastic app that's, I think, about $9 or $10 to download. It's not very expensive, called Sunseeker. It's an augmented reality app that works on Android and Apple, and you can see the position of the sun on any day of the year in any position in the world by plugging in your address into this app. And it's brilliant for you being able to see what's the sun going to be doing, particularly if you're buying a property and you plan to renovate it, you haven't lived in it for a while, or you're buying an investment property. For example, when we were looking at our properties, I would always look at them on Google Maps first. I would look at them on Sunseeker. If they didn't have particular performance with their orientation, I wouldn't even bother going to the open inspection. So that's how critical it was for me in terms of the result that I knew we were going to be getting after we finished our project. So, so orientation's a big one. And then really understanding the kinds of spaces that you want to have in your home. How do you want them to be sized, what they need to be containing, do you have particular furniture or those types of things. A number of times I see people design floor plans and not put furniture in them at the design stage, and then they move in and have to figure out where their furniture is going to go. It's just, always figure out what your furniture is doing in your floor plan first. It'll save you a lot of disappointment down the track. And really figuring out how you're going to communicate this with the people that you need to. So as architects and designers, we help homeowners create what we call a brief. And that's basically a description of the kinds of spaces and the quality of life that they want in their home. It'll include things like the budget and other key criteria. And that becomes like a communication platform for the whole project that everybody then can be on the same page, no pun intended, about what the project needs and what you as a homeowner are seeking. So it's really getting those. And like I can't emphasize it enough, time spent in the design phase is always time well spent, because making change whilst your home is lines on a page is so much cheaper than you changing your mind during construction. So, and people just race through it. And I think it's because they either can't understand drawings or they're impatient. They just want to get to site. But it's where those lines are what create your lifestyle. So it's really important that you spend your time there and get some good quality advice as well.
Do you encourage a bit of sketching and all of that type of play work with the couple or the individual prior to, before you begin or before you get into that design stage? I mean, I know Jane and I spent 18 months in our property and we were watching the seasons change and what was happening and, some of the observations. Is that something you'd encourage them to sort of have a couple of goes at mocking up some ideas?
It depends who you're going to work with. If you're planning on working with an architect and there's somebody whose work you really like, you've seen the kinds of projects that they do, you trust their sensibilities in terms of what they do, then I just get really clear on how you want to live both now and into the future, and then trust them to come up with the ideas for you.
Yep.
Some homeowners, though, they love the fact that they kind of get to work on the design and they're using apps and things like that. It's really a personal choice. But if you're planning on working with a designer, then give them some room to do what they do well, and don't be prescriptive about kind of what you're seeking. Instead, try to describe in a kind of goals and what you're seeking to achieve way of, you know, what your aims are for your house overall.
So as an illustration of that, so our focus, I'll just share with you what our focuses were in terms of themes. So abundance of natural light. So we wanted lots of glass and natural light. Very entertainment orientated social household where we could create lots of memories with lots of people. If we were going to build this home, it needed to be filled because there's only 4 of us who live in it. Open spaces was a brief, and then the play areas away from the sleeping zone. So that was sort of the main themes. And is that the sort of stuff you're looking for as an architect in terms of getting those clues around, you know, how I can design around that?
Yeah, definitely. I also ask questions about, you know, what do you do with your spare time? Like, what, are you outdoorsy people? Are you people who, you know, you all hang out and read books together? Like, do you watch, you know, how do you spend your time together as a family? How do you spend your time apart? Because that often gives me clues about how a family needs the house to perform for them, what storage they might need, those kinds of things. And then it's, you know, do you plan on there only ever being 4 of you living in this house? Are there going to be parents that might move in down the track? Are you wanting an au pair? Are you, you know, how long do you think your kids are going to be home for? Are you planning on having any more children? And understanding kind of how much the house needs to expand. And then it's lots of specific questions about, you know, how do you cook in your kitchen? What do you want your bathroom to be like? When you say lots of natural light and lots of glass, do you still have artwork and photographs that you need to hang on the walls? You know, like, it's what kind of furniture do you need to put in there? It's you're going right big picture,
Next
and
layers,
and then bringing it right down to detail. And
but
you
also
know,
looking over the hill too, right? Because, you know, I've got a 6 and 8 year old, Ben's got a 7 and 9 year old. They're going to be teenagers before we know it. So there's no point sort of denying that fact that there needs to be some form of separation at some point. So it's about looking around the corner or looking over the hill as well.
Definitely, yeah, and just seeing how you can future-proof the house as much as possible. So, and really, like, that's the benefit, I think, of working with somebody who's had experience with working with lots of families of lots of different ages, because they can, and particularly somebody who's been in their career for a while, they can see how those homes have performed and served people over the long term. So it's really that case of them being able to feed that in and build that flexibility into the home. You know, homes can be quite adaptable and flexible, even though they're permanent objects, in how they're going to support you over the long term in your home.
Yep. All right, so number one was the phase was before you begin. The second phase was getting your design right. What's the third phase?
It's before you build. So again, people finish their design and think, right, okay, I can get built now. It's like, no, stop. So many people delay the nitty-gritty decision making until after they've signed their contract.
Oh, I'm hearing you.
And they enter. And I don't know what it is, because you're never going to be under more pressure to make, like, if you have to make a decision during construction, it's usually because the builder needs something on site tomorrow. And chances are it'll come when you've got 12 other things in your day to do. And the last thing you've got time for is to ring around, you know, plumbing suppliers and figure out what tapware you're going to have. So so for me, I'm always encouraging people to bring all of their decision making forward and to sign contracts that actually have specified in them exactly what they want in their project. So you're not signing contracts with provisional sums or PC items and allowances in them, because what will happen is you'll sign a contract, that allowance won't be enough, and then you'll be paying a variation margin, which is higher than a standard building margin on that item that you decide to include down the track. So for me, it's that before you build stage is obviously getting all of your approvals right. It's ensuring that the cost to build is actually the cost of the house that you want to build or renovate. It's not just an estimation of it. And that you've really pulled that team together in a collaborative way. Everybody understands exactly what's going on, and you're starting to you're obviously having conversations with builders if you haven't already been doing that up to this point, and you're seeing who are you going to be able to trust with your project. So
that were the big ones for me. I mean, this is where we made our 2 biggest mistakes. Was one is the forward planning, because we were having conversations with our team, and I was saying, oh, no, we'll let you know when you need to decide, 4, 6 weeks. Well, 4, 6 weeks, 12 weeks for some of the stuff we were ordering was taking longer than 3 months to be. So it's like, so that pushed the project out. And the other big one, we were cost plus, right? So
oh, what?
So blew out. And that was because also it's difficult making decisions, right? So when Jane led the project, and so I'm sort of working full time in the business, and she's making, but it's hard, right? She wants to make the decisions, and we're both procrastinating on a few. So hence you can see how the project can blow out. In our case, by a fair bit of money. So
it is hard because those decisions can feel very overwhelming. And I think they say there's something like 15,000 decisions to make when you're building or renovating a home. So, and there are loads because you're obviously picking every single surface. Yeah. And so it's really, you don't want to be making that decision under a time pressure.
Correct.
And because most of the time you then lose the opportunity to have the thing you really want because it's got a lead time, or it's got a cost impact, or it's got a time impact that you didn't anticipate. So it's, getting that support and help around you to bring that decision making forward. And I find that men and women handle this very differently. And so it is that thing of how do you work together as if you're doing this as a couple to really kind of support each other through that process, and how can your team support you really well through that process. But I'm always encouraging homeowners that you go to your builder's contract literally with a list of specifications of everything exactly that you want,
Fixed
and
price.
it's already priced and included. Yeah,
Fixed
and that
price contract.
Yeah,
I can't stress it enough. I mean,
there's a relationship.
Well, yeah, well, of course, and there's a high level of trust with that particular builder that we use. But even then, we had other subbies coming in on the job, right? So our kitchen builder was a subby, our floors were subbed, and we got problems with the floor. So there were certain things. So just because when you got fixed price, exactly what Amelia is saying, you actually put in the specifications in there. So you've got to make those decisions then and there. You don't wait until, the builder says, I need you to make a decision on the tiles within the next 4 weeks, Jane, because that's when we're going to be ready for that. And then all of a sudden it's like, well, the tiles that you wanted are now out of stock and it won't be, it's like, oh my God.
The thing is, so people, but people do sign fixed price contracts, and it'll have like $10,000 in for a kitchen when the kitchen they actually want is a $30,000 kitchen.
Yeah.
Or it'll have tiles allowed, but the tiles are a 300 by 300 that are at a low cost per square metre, and they actually want a 600 by 600 tile, which costs more to lay and costs more per square metre. So, and all of those things, the variation margin usually is around 30 to 35%. So and there will be builders out there, less than reputable builders, who will price projects low, knowing that they'll eke back what they need in the variations. And as a homeowner, it's your job to get yourself informed and empowered. Anybody who's doing a building or renovation project, get yourself informed and empowered so that you can just not fall for it, not fall for the people who are telling you what you want to hear, but actually know, okay, I'm going in, this is exactly what I want, this is what's priced, and I know that anything that comes up is just going to be something that wasn't actually foreseeable in the process. So.
And you quoted initials there, PC. Can you just explain what PC means when you're looking at those contracts?
Yeah, so there's provisional sum and prime cost item, and they're just the different ways that allowances get put into, or basically parcels of work get put into a contract. So a PC item will be a toilet or, those types of things. A provisional sum will be the electrical work. And the thing is, you can have those priced accurately by doing something like having a specification with all of your sanitary ware, all of your tapware and those kinds of things, all listed out with brand names and those kinds of things against it. Your electrical work, you can have a plan that's got your lighting layout and your power layout, all there, so that an electrician, when they're quoting the job for the builder, actually has something to refer to list out exactly what's included. And that becomes part of the contract documentation. And that's really essential. Those drawings then are part of the contract, and you've got something to fall back on should somebody not be doing what they're supposed to when they're executing your project.
Beautiful. Hey, Amelia, there are some design companies out there who design a home, they get all the specs, everything ready, and then they give it to you and encourage you to be an owner builder. Have you come across those, and what feedback do you have?
I would never be an owner builder. And I'm an architect with almost 25 years industry experience. It was interesting, actually. There's something going through VCAT just recently where an owner builder who sold their property in, I believe, 2012, had done 3 projects had done various projects during the course of owning their property. The people have bought the property. They've had it disclosed to them that it was renovated by owner builders. They've had a pre-purchase inspection that's called up some faults. They've signed the contract knowing those things, and then they've then put in a claim to VCAT in 2016, 2017. on things that were past the normal defect liability period, that are work that they believe is faulty. And it's to the tune that VCAT have found in favour of the current owners against the owner builders to the tune of $96,000. And it's owner builders wear as much liability as builders, and they just don't realise this. And you can't outsource that liability. You can't say, I had a builder, you know, these people, for example, they had a builder restump their property, and they're saying, well, we had a builder do that. And it's like, well, you're still the owner builder. You're still the one that wears ultimate liability. Yes, you could countersue that builder, but you're the one that's going to be responsible. So I feel like there is so, and the thing is that the construction industry, just because of a lot of the stuff that's been going on lately with obviously, you know, structural performance of high rises and cracking, the flammable cladding, there's so much scrutiny on the industry and the poor performance and the poor longevity of buildings at the moment. I think this is just going to become more and more litigious. And I would not be being an owner builder. And I think, unfortunately, people go in thinking that they're going to save money, but I think it's 2/3 of owner builder projects go over budget versus 1 in 2 of standard projects.
I'm in that 2/3 because when you're cost plus, guess what? You're owner builder when you're bringing in those projects. So as I said, ours was done in 3 stages. Our very first stage was owner builder, and we learnt from that to switch back. But it's messy.
When's the book coming out, mate? What not to do?
A lovely home, just a lot of stress.
I can vouch for that. I've learned a few lessons from his experience. Hey, so first phase was before you begin. Second phase was getting your design right. Third phase was before you build. What's the fourth phase, Amelia?
Getting it built. And the thing is that when you've done those first 3 phases well, this phase should happen very smoothly, very efficiently, and be very streamlined. And everybody should just be doing all the things that you knew that they were going to do because you planned for it all along. So getting it built is obviously about choosing your builder and getting your project management systems in place. So you may not be an owner builder, but somebody needs to project manage your project. The builder is not your project manager, they're their project manager. And they will be ensuring the delivery of your project, but they'll also be managing their profitability and their systems and processes as well. And so I always feel that you need an advocate for yourself on site. So that's either got to be you or somebody else, be it a project manager or an architect or somebody like that you hire to represent you at weekly meetings. You're tracking cash flow, you're tracking progress against time, and you're checking that things are being done as per the contract and the drawings, and that you really keep yourself informed of that and don't just sort of let things get away from you. So, and the biggest problem is that people just don't see the red flags. They wait. Women in particular really struggle having difficult conversations with a builder. They don't necessarily like having confrontational conversations. Or what I'll see is a couple talking to the builder, and the builder will be addressing the husband, and the wife kind of feels left out of the process. She wants more time to make the decision. She wants sort of an opportunity to go away and think about it, and the builder's not giving her that time, and she feels a bit railroaded. And so it's really about making sure that you've got processes in place for proper communication, proper reporting. Those weekly meetings are critical, and at the end of the day, the site becomes the builder's when they take it over, so you actually have to have permission to be on the site. I've seen homeowners get locked out of their own sites, so it's essential that you have that embedded in your contract up front, that you will have access to the site, that there'll be weekly site meetings occurring, and that you'll be tracking progress in that way.
So given communication is so critical, what are some of the ways to make sure that communication stays smooth, particularly if someone is feeling marginalised? It's really important that when you're actually interviewing builders, that you actually ascertain, do they have decent communication style? It's not something you get taught as part of the process of becoming a builder. And so you want to know that somebody's, being transparent and open in the way that they communicate with you. They're not treating you like an idiot. They actually see that they're the expert that has to guide and support you and meet you where your needs are at, and help you feel reassured that they have processes in place. They'll be very communicative about talking about how they do things. And, when I talk to good builders, they say to me, look, no question's a silly question. We know that we need to answer these things. We know that we need to make our clients feel taken care of and supported, and that this is a big deal for them. It's their first time, or, they've not done this often. We do this every day. And there needs to be some expectation management around that as well. Builders are professionals. You need to make sure that you don't expect that you're just going to be able to call them at 7 o'clock at night just because that's when you've got home from work. That you have processes in place, and that you're always keeping your communication in writing as well, and that they're keeping their communication in writing. If they're handling things casually,
if they're not operating according to the contract, if they're operating their filing system out of their glove box, walk away. Like, it's just you want to see they've got admin staff, or they've got some kind of processes in place where they're not going to be taking 10 other phone calls on your site during the day from 10 other clients. You know, that they actually have systems and processes that mean that your project's going to get dedicated attention and that you're always going to feel informed. But those weekly site meetings, they're such a hotbed of communication. They're where you can deal with all of those issues, and you can anticipate anything coming up, so you don't get the phone call from site that says, hey, we need that thing tomorrow, when it hasn't been mentioned for the last 4 months, you know. So
really, really great advice.
Got any final ones?
Yeah, I do want to,
Yeah,
because clearly that's a terrific framework. But you mentioned the VCAT story before with the owner builder. Can you share with us, you know, one of your career horror stories? What's when this all goes when this all goes terribly pear shaped? What does that look like? And hopefully, for someone who might be considering a build coming up, they can avoid it.
Look, there's been a few along the way. I know personally, my husband and I renovating ourselves, you know, there were quite a few where we did the thing, like we chose the cheapest quote and ended up having a disaster with it. I remember standing on site pregnant, arguing with a concrete floor grinder about the terrible job that he'd done and how he was running. He'd actually short-circuited the our fuse box so that he could run the power that he needed directly without bypassing the safety switch system, you know, so, and the mess that he made and all of these kinds of things. Like, yeah, the thing is that what I've found is that if you can realize that it's not personal, you know, the problem is that it feels so personal because you're emotionally attached to the fact that you're creating your home and you're generally dealing person to person. And so everything feels so personal. But I found that what's always worked for me is when you actually just stick to the facts, you know, stick to the expectations and be really clear. And when it's not working, that you just cut your losses and pull out, you know. There can be this thing of, Seth Godin talks about sunk cost, you know, where you feel like you've already invested so much time and money, it's too much time and money to walk away, but all you're doing is backing yourself into a worse and worse corner. And, you know, I remember one client, the builder had been a fantastic builder to start with, but then he went through a marriage breakup in the middle of the project and things just went pear-shaped, and he was installing stuff that wasn't as per manufacturer's specifications, and the client was a lawyer, you know. So it's so that client immediately went, well, this is what needs to happen, I've got to take this to, you know, the tribunal, and it ended up ending really badly for the builder. But if he'd just been able to, he kept just pretending like everything was okay, you know. So yeah, it's one of these things, you've got to just make sure that you're staying on top of it, not making it personal. They had, you know, everybody always has stuff that they're dealing with, and you know, me standing pregnant having a conversation with the concrete and bawling my eyes out because I was just so frustrated it hadn't gone how I wanted it to, and in the end just firing him because it was just, you know, you just can't, sometimes that's the best that you can do. So yeah.
So is renovating and building in your blood? You talked about the fact that you had got up to the point where you're now in the Byron Bay hinterland. I'm making a big assumption, but sounds like a dream location for you. Do you now pivot and go, okay, my investments into property are now more passive, or will you always see an opportunity in the next purchase that you make?
Yeah, no, my husband and I think we both love having projects, and we've got a couple of old caravans that have been sitting that we bought that we keep kind of talking about doing up or doing something with. We both like tinkering. We're both just flat out. Obviously, my husband is a physio by trade, but he's now breeding miniature Galloway cows. And and we've got an 80-acre property, and 3 children. So that kind of creates a full-time job for him, definitely. He does a huge amount around here and supporting me and running Undercover Architect. And Undercover Architect's been a full-time job for me for the last 5 years. So I don't think it's something that you can necessarily let go of. Like we had this funny conversation in the car once where I said to him, okay, can we write down all of the challenges that we've had? Because I really do want to share them with the UA community. And I think we got up to about number 26, and I went, it's like childbirth. I'd just forgotten how terrible some of these times. Like you just, but at the same time, you create this incredible result at the end, you know. And I think of each of those 3 houses and how they finished, and the families that bought them and moved into them, and the joy that it created, you know, and what we got to create with our own skills was just, it's just so exciting. And I think, I can't see us ever it ever not being part of what we do. And, you know, it's just obviously finding the time for it at the moment. And I'm just having such fun helping so many people with their projects that, yeah, I obviously get to live vicariously through what they're doing. So.
And I agree with you. I mean, because the conversation there has got to be, for some people, like, this is just overwhelming. So many things to think about, 15,000+ decisions. The message is you do get out the other side. And when you do get the other side, the memories start to be created and those other horror memories start to fade. So it is worthwhile. I mean, we don't want to scare anyone off from not venturing down this path, but it's about preparation and planning. I mean, it's everything that we always talk about. It's like you plan to become what you plan to become. And if this is going to be something you want to get involved in, find the checklist, work through the programs and get prepared. And if you prepare well, usually you don't have the headaches that some of us do have.
Yeah, definitely. You have less headaches, and you also, when you do have a headache, you have the strategies to handle it.
Yeah.
So for me, the headaches that are the most disastrous ones are the ones that just blindside you because you weren't informed and empowered and educated to know that some things might come up. And unfortunately, I think because it is so overwhelming, people attack it like they're tearing off a Band-Aid, and they just figure it's going to be a disaster anyway, and they just have to brace themselves. But I've seen time and time again how much better it goes for people when they are prepared, when they do understand the process overall. And it's exactly like you say, Ben. I can't promise it's going to be easy. I do promise it can be dramatically simplified, and I can promise that when you do it and do it well and you get it right, it is so worth it for what you create at the end of it and the lifestyle that you then get to live. So
beautiful.
Seems like a good place to leave this this really insightful chat. We can clearly see that you're passionate about this topic. We certainly appreciate that you've shared this framework with the Property Couch community. We'll leave the details in the show notes for anyone who wants to reach out and say good day to you and have a look at some of the materials that you do, as did my wife and as I have been looking at lately. But again, thank you for coming onto the Property Couch. And you never know, we might have another building project one day and learn the mistakes beforehand. Thanks again, Amelia.
Oh, thank you. It's been fantastic. Great opportunity.
All right, Ben. So hopefully our listeners will get a lot out of that to give them some insights if they're building, whether they're renovating, sort of thoughts that you need to go through in doing either of those.
Oh, look, a lot of takeaways for me. I just like the fact that practical stuff, right? Practical observations. But what I also like about her backstory, she's been there, she's done it, and she's harnessed all of that into her practical advice. And experience is experience. You can only get that in the field. And she's been able to harness all of that, dealing with people, how to get them through changing their minds or getting them to make a decision. So real credit to her, and it was a great interview. So thanks for that, Amelia.
Really great content. Thank you. Hey, my life hack today comes via our CEO, Ben.
Okay.
Jamie Sinclair, shout out to him.
Yep.
The other day he was in the office heading back to Sydney.
Yes.
Opens up the Qantas app.
Yep.
And I was happy to be in view of that, and then pushes the Uber app and books the Uber. And I said, what did you do that for? Because I can get my Qantas points for booking my Uber through the Qantas app. I thought, ooh.
Finally, Vivis, I'm actually doing something that Bryce didn't know. I mean, I've been doing that for a while now too. Get me Qantas points. So there you go.
So there is a side story to that. Just keeps that to himself. Didn't want to share it amongst our community.
Good. Oh my! Right? I didn't know that was part of my job.
Oh,
my job description here is just did you know, isn't it?
Book Uber through the Qantas app and you get the points. Thank you, Jamie. I thought that was a ripper.
Yeah, that's a good one.
So there's a little life hack for you, Ben. Did you know?
Did you know, Bryce? Well, carrying on from last week. 249. I'm excited about 250. But here we go. So we were talking about roads, Bryce.
Yes.
And now we're doing Australia. So let's get into...
You're talking about big circle roads.
Yeah, good point. That weren't right. So the Pan-American Highway, we said that was overseas. Thank you very much, bro. Okay, here in Australia, our longest highway is which one, Bryce? Which one?
M1.
M1. That's like a metropolitan ring road, mate.
I don't know the answer. I'm just throwing.
You live here, Bryce.
Well, I haven't thought it through as much as you have.
Where are the big highways?
Up and down the east coast, across the Nullarbor, east-west.
Keep going. What are the names of them?
The Nullarbor. I don't know.
What's the name of it?
Thank you for highlighting that I'm not in tune with the names of the roads.
Ivis, you got any ideas? Okay. Well, the first one.
We don't have the notes in front of us,
The number one is 2,710 kilometres long, and it is the Stewart Highway.
Yes, Stewart Highway.
The Stewart Highway, closely followed by
which
the
is
Bruce
connects
Highway.
between where and where, Ben?
Stewart, down the guts, down the middle of
Yeah,
Australia.
between where and where?
Oh, Adelaide and Darwin.
Oh, okay.
All right.
All right.
So,
yeah,
no,
well,
really?
you're
Okay,
shaky
I
on
was
that.
going to check that.
Yeah.
You know, sort of,
Yeah, no, if you're going to throw us
fact
under the
check.
bus, we're going to throw it back.
Fact check. Okay. Bruce Highway and the Air Highway.
You should be able to get this one.
Right. The Bruce Highway is 1,670 kilometres, obviously in Queensland. Up the Bruce Highway.
Yeah.
It's halfway. It's always closed because of floods or roadworks. That's not true. Difficult up there in Queensland for the weather. And the Air Highway is obviously the one that stretches from Adelaide through to, or South Australia through to Western Australia, your hometown there,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Most people are going the other way though. They're coming from Australia.
Last person to leave, turn the lights out.
All right, now let's go to the longest street, the main street in Australia, is from a little town in Queensland called Camooweal.
Yeah.
I think that might be how you pronounce it. And that's on the Barkly Highway, and that stretches almost 200 kilometres.
All right.
Not a bad little main
Which part
street.
of Queensland would that be, Ben?
Out to Mount Isa.
Yeah.
So everyone know where Mount Isa is?
Yeah.
So it's out the back, outback. Queensland outback.
Yeah.
All right, so that's the Barkly Highway from Camooweal, I think is probably how you pronounce it. Apologies for those people. They shout out to me. Heckle me on socials if I'm wrong. In terms of the longest straight road in Australia, just circling the last three that we did for international now, it's the famous road. What is it? A straight road. Whereabouts is it? Where would a straight road live in this country? We have got a lot of straight roads out in the outback. Where are we going here?
Is it the one that heads up to the big rock?
Out of the Ayers Rock at Uluru. No, it's not out there in Mutijulu, Uluru and Katajuda National Park. No, not out that way. I've driven that
it
road.
has the name drop
I've been
there.
out there while I used to work for that company. No, not out that way. Not through Central Australia. So the famous 90-mile straight, it's called. It's actually 91 miles or 146.64 kilometres. And it is on the Air Highway from
Over to Perth.
South Australia to Western Australia, and it's from
I didn't want to sound like
Ballandonia to Kangunda.
Oh, yeah, clearly you've been through those towns.
I have no idea how to pronounce those two. So there you go. Apologies for botching up the names.
Butchering everything.
but that's the longest straight bit of road in Australia, and it goes for 146 kilometres. So in Australia, if you don't have a Tesla, just grab your steering wheel, grab your belt, okay, and strap it to and then basically fall asleep. And
No, they should listen to at 1.5 speed the back catalogue of the podcast.
They're bound to crash and fall asleep if they're listening to our podcast.
Maybe just the sign off. So
there we go.
All right, mate. I did not know that. Clearly, based on some of my answers.
Bit of fun. Take it as a grain of salt.
I'm just a small town Perth boy, mate. I'm not
just
worldly
a small
like
town
you.
boy.
All right, Ben. Until next week.
Until next week.
Where's your
250, our mega guest.
Yep.
Okay, knowledge is empowering, Bryce, but only if you act on it.
Well said. See you next week, folks. Hey there, folks. Bryce Holdaway here. Before you go, if you're new to our community and only listened to maybe a handful of episodes, I thoroughly recommend that you go all the way back to episode number 1, where we unpack all of the foundations when it comes to property investing. Now, for those of you that might be a little bit time poor, I've got good news for you. We have a binge guide that you can download straight away, which summarises the first 20 episodes where Ben and I unpack the foundational pillars of the A, B, C, D, and so much more. And you can get that straight away. If you go to thepropertycouch.com.au/TPC20, you can download it and consume it whenever you want. It's completely free and available now. And for those of you, just a quick reminder that nothing we've spoken about today constitutes financial advice. We recommend that you reach out to your licensed professional advisor so that you can look at your unique circumstances before acting on any information. Now don't forget, go to thepropertycouch.com.au/TPC20 and get your binge guide today.